morning and Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday morning at 10 o'clock Pacific time. Christy, we just lost your video somehow. So hopefully you'll be able to get that back online. Are you there, Christy? Okay, we lost Christy. Well, hopefully she will sign back in. Hello, everyone. I am Michelle Wild, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Best Brain Education Strategies and Technology. And we're very excited to launch our first web. There's Christy. Welcome back. We're very excited to launch our first webinar series for 2022. The series is called Building Blocks for Cognitive Success. And it's a 5-part series. We will be doing this for every other week for the next month and a half, or a couple months, I guess. And we're so glad that you're here to join us. We're going to, the Building Block series is really about some of the foundational components that I have found to be very helpful in my experience. Some of you are very new to us, so thank you so much for joining us. We're going to tell you a little bit about us before we actually dive into the webinar, just so that you have a point of reference. I am an educator. I am a professor at Coastline College in Southern California. My entire career has been teaching cognitive. Christy, you just left again. My entire career has been teaching cognitive retraining skills to adults with acquired brain injury. And I am now in my 33rd year of doing that. Yes, I started very young. Welcome to you. And thank you again so much for joining us. Hopefully, Christy will get back online here in just a second. While we're waiting for her, I did want to kind of introduce you to what we're going to be doing during the webinar series, and help you find the different places that you might want to go. We're using a system called Webinar Ninja. Christy, we lost you again. So whatever you're doing, you may not want to do that. Your screen keeps going blank. So just as a point of reference. So we have within the Webinar Ninja system, which is the webinar system that we're using, depending on whether you're on a computer or a phone or a iPad, there's going to be some tabs. One is a chat tab. It's got 2 little thought bubbles, if you will. One is a questions tab that has a question mark on it. The other is a polls tab. We have a couple of polls that we're going to ask that you take. We also have a handouts tab on the it looks like a piece of paper with a dog ear folded down. I did send out handouts to everyone that was registered as of last night. But if you've registered since then and did not get the handouts, we encourage you to go ahead and do that. If you tap on the handouts tab, you will be able to see the handout, and it will say that you can go ahead and download that. That's a PDF file of the, excuse me, of the slides that we have for today. So hopefully that will help you guys. We highly recommend that you print the handouts out when you can in advance. I will send them out the night before the webinars, just so that people have an opportunity. There's a lot of research that indicates that if you have the handouts and you actually write on the handouts, memory is going to be enhanced. So there's a couple things there for you. I'm going to have Christy introduce herself, and then I have one more thing I want to talk about regarding the webinars, and we'll get started. So Christy, tell us all about you. Well, at least a little about you.
I suffered a brain injury almost 8 years ago in 2014, and a year later I was in Michelle's class, and as I went through her ABI program that she teaches at Coastline, and as I was leaving it, I wanted to try to do something to connect with other survivors and caregivers and significant others to be able to help them learn the things that I had learned. And so I approached Michelle, and that's how Best became Best. So
yeah. That's great. We also just celebrated our 5-year anniversary over the summer for starting Best. So we have been a nonprofit for 5 years now. And there is a really great video that we did on our YouTube channel I will share that link with you at some point if you're interested. Just kind of gives a history of our 5 years and what we've worked on, and all the amazing collaborations and partnerships that we have been fortunate enough to be able to get as we've been working through all this. So, welcome everyone. Oh my gosh, Annie, welcome. It's so great to see your name. I saw Lisa, there's a bunch of different people. So, welcome everyone. One thing before we actually dive in is we have set up the webinars just a little bit different this time. So, what we're going to do is we are going to have a short span where we're going to talk about the slides specifically. We're not going to look at the chat. We're going to try and ignore the chat just for that period of time. Then we have what we call our chat and discussion slide. When you see the chat and discussion slides, that's when we'll actually stop with the instructional stuff and we will look at the chat, we'll answer questions, and we'll engage with you. This is a way for us to sort of have a clean recording so that we can use some of this information again in other areas potentially. So, are there any questions before we get started? I will mention that question icon that I told you about. If you write questions in that tab, you will, I will be able to see them and I'll be able to mark it in the video so that you can go through and watch the recording and be able to go directly to answers if that's helpful to you. So you will get a recording almost immediately after the webinar ends of the webinar in an email, and that recording will be available to you for 2 weeks, and then it will go away. So are there any questions before we get started? Go ahead and put them in the chat real quick or in the question area. And if not, then we'll dive in. We won't spend 5 minutes at the beginning of each webinar doing introductions and stuff. But since this is the beginning of our series, we wanted to make sure that you knew a little bit about us and a little bit about our system. Christy, you just went away again. Okay, so let's go ahead then and get started. Welcome. We are just beginning our what is cognitive rehabilitation information. So, cognitive rehabilitation is something that some people have after a brain injury. Some people are provided with cognitive rehab. And we've actually found out through communications with people all over the country and really all over the world that, in fact, not everybody gets cognitive rehabilitation. And so, we wanted to start this particular series with some information about what cognitive rehabilitation actually is and why it's important in the process of sort of recovering and dealing with brain injury. So the first thing is just sort of a basic definition of what is cognitive rehabilitation. It's the process of addressing cognitive challenges in order to help people with a variety of neurological conditions. The idea is to help improve daily life skills in a systematic and, I've added, in a practical way. So, cognitive rehabilitation is actually a process that can be beneficial to individuals with lots of different cognitive challenges, not just brain injury. Our expertise is actually in brain injury, but individuals with MS and COVID, long haul COVID, lots of other different types of conditions can impact the brain. And so cognitive rehabilitation can be very helpful for a wide variety of individuals. I've highlighted here the systematic and practical words. Systematic because there actually is a hierarchy involved in cognitive rehabilitation. For instance, if a person can't pay attention long enough to learn new information, then we really need to address some attentional issues, etc. So we'll be talking over the course of the webinar series about a lot of the different cognitive areas, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. The other thing that's important here is the word practical. And the word practical is, I think, especially important. If we as professionals don't address the cognitive skills in a very practical way, help people that are struggling with cognitive challenges understand how those cognitive challenges impact them in their everyday life. and how the strategies and the techniques that we teach in cognitive rehabilitation can help them with those challenges, then often I think we aren't having the impact that we could potentially have. So I think those are some key elements, if you will, of the definition of cognitive rehabilitation. So there are a wide variety of cognitive issues that people have after a brain injury and some of those other conditions that I mentioned. I've got time management listed here. We've got memory, planning, initiation, problem solving. If you are living with a brain injury, then these are probably very familiar to you. Just because you have a brain injury doesn't mean you struggle with all of these areas, but these are some of the common areas that you may experience some difficulty or some challenge. So we wanted to address this and to share this with you. I'm going to go ahead and increase the screen. Christy, are you there?
Yes, I don't know if you
Okay.
can hear me.
We can hear you. I don't see you, but I can hear you. And so I'm going to go ahead and just increase the screen. So now everyone is looking at the cognitive issues screen. And Christy, if you'd like to share your thoughts, we'd love that.
You might not be aware that you struggle with one or more of these topics. One's awareness comes in different stages. Any one of these topics might be something you struggled with before your brain injury, but afterwards, any of these can impact your life. For instance, I was aware I had a difficult time with time management before my accident, but now I struggle with it more. One of my strategies to help me manage my time is to add more time when planning to complete a task or track how long it takes to how many I'm sorry, how many attempts it takes to work on a project before it's finished. Like knowing how long sorry, knowing how long it takes me to clean the kitchen or my car or grocery shopping will help me know how much to plan the next time I want to do that task. Organization is another challenge I had before my TBI, but now when things are not organized, I have a very difficult time. Disorganization affects many parts of my life. It's important to me now to have a home for everything it will help me categorize or group things together. Having a home for everything helps me with time because I spend less time trying to find something. Memory is completely different after my brain injury. It's as if information is floating around in a bubble, but before I can even conceptualize the idea, that bubble pops and that information is gone in an instant. Initiation, problem solving, making decisions. These I say what are my biggest struggles. After my accident, I was probably a lot like the majority of you. I didn't know what self-regulation was before I was a student in Michelle's class. We'll cover that topic at another time.
Thanks, Christy. That was really helpful. I think just your insights that you've gotten over the years are amazing. And it's hard to believe that we've known each other for 8 years now, and you've come such a long way. So thank you for sharing that information. I'm sure everyone really benefits from that insight. Let's go ahead and move on to the goal of cognitive rehabilitation. Really, the idea is to identify and reduce cognitive deficits to the extent that that you can. You really want to set realistic goals as well, and you want to be able to identify and implement compensatory skills. Compensatory skills will actually help you improve your practical life skills. It'll help you increase your independence and overall, hopefully, improve your quality of life. So, those are some of the goals of cognitive rehabilitation. And then, I guess the question, why is Cog Rehab important? Because it includes learning new skills and strategies, as well as relearning what you may have lost as a result of your injury or illness. So, Christy just mentioned something about self-awareness and self-regulation. That's such an important aspect of brain injury, is to be able to develop self-awareness and then to learn to self-regulate your behavior and what you do in order to really optimize, again, that independence and your daily successes. Another reason why Cog Rehab is important is because it helps you identify your strengths and challenges. You may, due to awareness issues, you may not know some of the challenges that you have. You may not know some of the strengths that you have as well. It's not uncommon in my classroom where a person will think that they're really struggling with something, and it actually can be a strength for them. So identifying your strengths and your challenges and then figuring out ways to compensate for those or to address those issues is another reason why Cog Rehab is so important. And then ultimately, Cog Rehab is important because it helps you search for effective strategies that you can use. Again, with the idea to kind of make things easier, make life easier, and to make you more independent.
I just wanted to add something to what you just said, Michelle, that having strategies, at brain injury, I get this all the time from people that, wow, I do things in such a different way, but kind of more effective way than others. And um, they're very surprised by that. And it's because when you have a brain injury, you have to compensate more, and it's important to have those strategies that you were talking about. And because we're more aware and we are using strategies, we are doing things in probably more of an effective way because of the awareness and because of the strategies. So I just wanted to add that people will and do recognize that not only are things different, maybe in a negative way, but also in a positive way.
Yeah, very interesting. We'll talk about strategies as we move into some of the later webinars in this series. A lot of times people don't even know that they're using strategies. They don't recognize things as a strategies. Before a brain injury, oftentimes people call strategies, they're sort of tricks that they use to be more efficient or to be more productive or things like that. And tricks are really just strategies. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Christy, because that's an important part of all this and definitely something that we're going to be talking about and trying to provide some strategies for you guys as we go through this process. So now is our chat and question time. I have not seen any questions in the chat at this point. If you would write some questions down, give us a thumbs up, let us know that you're there and that the information so far is helpful to you. We would appreciate just knowing that you guys are out there, and again, would be more than happy to answer questions.
I have a question to ask everybody. I would like to know if anybody here would consider the idea that have they had cog rehab, and did they know what it was before? So it's two questions. I see. Did you have you heard of cog rehab? Did you um have cog rehab, and did you know what cog rehab was before you signed up for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Nicola
It's
says, "I
kind of
didn't know
three.
about Cog Rehab." Yeah. We feel very fortunate. We know that our group today has both professionals, speech and language pathologists, and other professionals within the rehab field have joined us, as well as a lot of survivors. So, again, thank you. It's a great mix of people. And if you are a speech and language pathologist and have something to say about Cog Rehab, please let us know. We can actually bring people on live. If we can bring up to one or two people on with us. So if there's something, Valerie says that she provides Cog Rehab. That's great as a speech and language pathologist. So if there's something that you'd like to share, we would be happy to learn from you as well. So thank you, Christy, for asking the question. And the other thing about Cog Rehab, we're going to talk a little bit about this as we move forward, is Cog Rehab is offered by different types of professionals. So it could be occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, etc. So, Deborah from Shepherd Center, welcome. So, okay, let's go ahead and keep moving then. In terms of cognitive rehabilitation, there's sort of two schools of thought. And for a long time, the two schools of thought were sort of pretty different from each other. And I think one of the things that I've always done is tried to sort of meld them together, if you will. So, one type of cog rehab is what they call restorative. And it is essentially an intense repetition and practice in specific cognitive domains. And what that means is you're going to do some drill and practice. You're going to use repetition a lot, and you're going to focus on one specific cognitive skill, typically, in order to really sort of restore as best as possible that particular cognitive skill. A lot of the online trainings that you'll find that have been around for a while really are more restorative in nature. They're that drill and practice, and so that's one side of the cog rehab division, I guess. Another thing is verbal mnemonic strategies. So there's a whole sort of internal memory approach, which would be considered restorative, versus an external, like using devices, your smartphone, those kinds of things. You can also use visual imagery is another example of kind of a restorative process, and visual imagery really works well for memory. And then, of course, I mentioned the specialized brain training programs that are out there. I'd be interested as we move forward to learn a little bit about whether or not people have been exposed to restorative or compensatory or both. So here is the compensatory. Really, the compensatory side of all of this is finding new ways or workarounds to approach and deal with cognitive challenges. So it is using your smartphone as a way to help with memory or to identify how much time has passed, or to organize things. So the compensatory side of all of this is really all about strategies, and we were talking about that prior. A couple things I wanted to say about Cog Rehab is there has, in the past, been a debate. Is it an art or is it a science? And Parente and Herman said in a article in 1996 that cognitive rehabilitation is the art and science of restoring mental processes after injury to the brain. And I have thought a lot about this, and I've actually talked to other professionals about this. And some professionals, at least in the ones I've talked to, really don't like to think of cog rehab as an art. They think of it really more as a science, and that there's a very specific approach and a very specific structure that you use for cog rehab. My approach is a little bit different. I think that creativity is extremely important in cognitive rehabilitation because cog rehab requires a really a need for creativity, for understanding, for flexibility, and really for thinking outside of the box. What I do at Coastline when I'm teaching is I don't just focus on one skill at a time. I try to bring in as many skills as I can that are relevant to whatever the particular topic is. So, for instance, if we're talking about organization, you can't really talk about organization without talking about sequencing and memory and attention and decision making. All of these cognitive skills really overlap and are not unique. And so from my perspective, it's really important to be creative and to be flexible and to think outside of the box when you're doing cognitive rehabilitation. For many years, again, I mentioned I've been doing this for over 30 years now. And for many years, it was very much a paper pencil kind of approach where, we would give paper pencil activities, packets, and that was very scientific, but there wasn't a lot of creativity and a lot of thinking outside of the box when we were doing that. And so I think it's really important for us as professionals to put our thinking caps on here and to try to reach individuals that are dealing with some of these challenges and struggles in a way that will really address their needs. So I hope that that's helpful.
I wanted to add something as far as the um, survivor side. I would probably add another requirement, and that would be the acceptance that your life had a huge earthquake, life quake, as some people say. And I feel that survivors need to be creative because they're not able to do the things the way they used to. And when try to stop yourself during those times when something is not going right to understand what is working and not working and why. Thinking out of the box means to be flexible in your thinking. Try to do things a little bit differently. Try to not stay stuck in thinking or finding yourself that you're stuck. This is how I've always done it. And because this is a fixed mindset, and because strategies and ways to do things might not work the same way after a brain injury. Instead, if something's not working, think of, hey, you know what? Let's try a different way. And that comes into the creativity part that you were talking about.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that because creativity is not just on the part of the professional, right? Which is what you're saying, Christy. Creativity is important on both sides, whether you're a professional trying to come up with ways to help the individual or whether you are an individual living with a brain injury. I love that. Thank you so much for saying that. I can always count on you for such great insights. Okay, so now is another time to chat and to bring up questions. Again, I still am not seeing questions in the chat or in the question area. So if you have any questions, please, this is the time to ask them. I'm going to kind of go through and monitor the chat at this point in time and make sure that I'm not
People have
missing anything.
people have shared that if they were survivors, some have had cog rehab.
Mhm.
Um, some haven't, so
Mm.
that's been interesting. That couple therapists have said they use it in their therapy, working with survivors. Um,
I love Betsy's comment. Can we say here that art may maybe imitate science and vice versa? Being creative for the person-centered approach gives science more info. That's great. Love it, Betsy. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, let's go ahead. We just have a little bit longer left of a little bit more information to share with you, and then we'll finish up. So, the next section that we're going to talk about here is really just to give you an overview of the types of rehab professionals. Um, Obviously, physicians are going to be a major component. There are different types of physicians that you may have been exposed to, and different types of therapists. So, we just wanted again to give a big picture overview in this initial webinar, in this initial video. So, a physiatrist really specializes in physical medicine and rehab. You may have seen this as PM&R. Um, and usually the physiatrist heads up an entire team of rehab specialists. A neurologist specializes in really diagnosing, treating, and managing disorders of the brain and the nervous system. A neurologist doesn't just focus on brain injury, although you may have a neurologist that is a brain injury specialist. Neurologists really work with individuals that have any type of disorders of the brain or the nervous system. A neuropsychologist specializes in cognitive testing for those with brain related disorders. Many of you have probably met with a neuropsychologist, a neurologist as well. It's interesting here in the States, physiatrists are out there and they're available, but so many people don't really have a reference for a physiatrist or access to a physiatrist. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know in other countries how that is, but I think that that's an interesting phenomenon because the physiatrist again really specializes in rehab medicine. So there's a lot of knowledge that they can bring to your particular case. In terms of case management and therapist, there are typically case managers involved in a lot of different situations, and case managers really just coordinate various aspects of rehab and provide amazing resources. So they have a vast knowledge base, if you will, of the rehab process and resources that can help you. So if you, in some cases, you might have a case manager from a hospital or from your medical perspective. In other cases, people may have a case manager for like vocational rehab or something like that. Occupational therapists, I saw we have a couple of those with us. Occupational therapists really address the functional challenges and activities of daily living. And speech and language pathologists, also known as SLPs, assess, diagnose, treat, and help patients with communication problems. It's pretty interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, some occupational therapists do Cog Rehab, and in other cases, speech and language pathologists do Cog Rehab. So it really just kind of depends on where you are and the system that you're a part of, kind of which individual. They work hand in hand. They work as part of a rehab team typically. And so as a result of that, um, they both are addressing Cog Rehab, but they do have different approaches. And then the last type of rehab professional, the last category, so to speak, is really therapist. And that's like a physical therapist, which addresses movement and pain management, etc. Many people after a brain injury are are working with or have worked with a physical therapist. Recreational therapists are amazing. I don't know that a lot of people are aware of recreation therapists, but they basically address stress and anxiety. They recover basic physical and mental abilities. They help build confidence. They help socialize, etc. So there's a lot of really interesting things that recreational therapists do to help individuals post injury. And then the last professional that we have here is a vision therapist. And vision therapists address a variety of vision problems associated with neurological issues. And I'm going to stop here for just a second. And vision therapists are often individuals that, again, people with brain injuries don't necessarily know about. A lot of individuals with brain injuries have vision issues that they may not even realize. In the environment in which I work, which is an educational environment, we have a lot of individuals that have different kinds of vision issues. And if you have a vision issue, it can definitely impact all those other areas that we've talked about. So, Betsy is saying yoga therapist too. I need to add that to the list. Thanks, Betsy, because that is a newer field, I think, but a very definite field and an important one. So thank you. I will add that to our list as we move forward.
I wanted to add that with the vision is how important. I had a vestibular issue. Still do, always will have, um, because of my accident. And so going to somebody who has a background with brain injuries and specifically in knowledge of brain injuries, if they're a vision therapist, is extremely helpful. I ended up seeing one after I had been in class with Michelle. I did not know that that was even something that was an opportunity to go and see. I was not told by anybody in my outpatient therapies that that would be somebody, a good therapist to go see. So I know that that might not be something that you are aware of and that you're struggling with. And so um, I would strongly try to ask a doctor or another therapist if they know somebody that they could recommend that specializes in vision therapy that also is knowledgeable about brain injury, because that's extremely important. The other thing I wanted to touch upon was going through, I had the opportunity to go through outpatient therapy after my brain injury, and I saw three therapists at a very limited time. I saw physical, occupational, and speech after my accident. And because it was limited, and it was limited because of insurance, and I wasn't quite um I didn't feel like I was being able to really compensate. I really know how to um I didn't feel like I could do things the way I used to. I didn't have ways to compensate. And one of the things that I had wished that I had learned in Michelle's class was to have some tools. And we'll briefly go as we go further in the series to show some tools to have, which is our app that we have. I wish I had learned about our app or that it was available, because as I went through therapy, or as you go through therapy, to be able to have a tool that's with you every day, um, and be able to have somebody that could teach me how to use it, go home, use it, and then go back and see, they could see how, where I'm having struggles. I could show them how I'm having struggles. But then it's a tool that after therapy I have. And another thing that I like about it, that maybe some people will feel like oh, I've got this. Life is great and grand. And the problem is that when we have another, let's say, life quake like COVID, you life changes, and you need to have those tools back in your hand. Problem is that a lot of us couldn't go back to therapy and kind of get a recharge or something like that. And so being able to have an app such as ours, and also being able to be involved in a group, to be able to have some connections, say with Best, and being able to go, oh, you know what, I'm having this problem. How do I, can you, to have some tools and ideas to how to go through that life quake. So I just, to be able to have some tools and strategies set up that you can always have after um, therapy is really, really important.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. That's great. Well, let's go to our chat and questions. And I can see here that Deborah asked, what's the name of the app? So Christy's talking about an app that we as a nonprofit have created. It's called the Best Suite, and it has 5 apps in one. We will be talking about it over time. Um, but the idea of I think what Christy's saying is to have something in rehab that you can take with you that's very practical, is quite helpful. and something that you can learn to use in therapy and then be able to take that with you once you finish therapy and you know how to use it. It's reliable, it's helpful. And I think that that's a really important thing. So the app is called The Best Suite. We will talk about it periodically. It's got 5 apps in one. One is for energy and fatigue management, goal setting, strategy, documentation and rating, task management, and then checklists and queuing. So there's a lot in the app. And one of the things that we've found is that um, it's difficult for people after their brain injury to know what to put into the app. So we're actually working on modifying some of the app right now to make it a little bit more user friendly, a little bit more streamlined, so to speak. So that'll be happening over the next 6 months or so. But the biggest challenge that we have seen is that people don't really know what to put in there. What are the strategies that, are beneficial to them, that work or don't work? And so as we go through this series and as we move forward over the course of the year, we'll be talking more about the Best Suite, and how it may benefit people. So Deborah, hopefully that is helpful to you. You can find some information. Lisa, oh, thank you. That I'm glad to see that you're using it and that it's benefiting you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Betsy says the limitation of the insurance approved session appears to be a game, a rigged game. I think, it is very difficult because there are limited numbers of sessions that you can get. And so one of the roles that we at Best, I'm going to go ahead and put us up on screen, Christy, just so you know. One of the roles that we at Best hope that we can fill is after people have gone through therapy and have sort of exhausted their insurance, we would really like to be there for individuals to help them on their continued journey. Unfortunately, brain injury is not something that you have and you go through rehab and then it's over. Brain injury is something that is long lasting, and it can sort of rear its ugly head periodically. You can feel like you're doing great. And as Christy said, a life quake happens, something changes significantly, and all of a sudden, people struggle again. So we hope that Best can fill a need that's out there as a nonprofit, and we're very happy to do that and very excited to try and fill that role for people. So any other questions or comments? There was a poll that just went live a few minutes ago. If you would take the time to do that, I would appreciate it. Basically, we're just trying to identify whether or not you found the webinar to be beneficial. And so we do appreciate that you answer that particular question. We can go back and we can also see how people may have heard about the webinar. If you found the webinar beneficial, we would really appreciate it if you could help us spread the word. This is just the first of the 5 parts. And so there's definitely going to be more information out there. This is just to sort of build a foundation for us to then, add to as we move forward. Another thing that we wanted to mention is our website, which is bestconnections.org. And this is a picture of the home screen right now. So if you know anyone that you think might benefit, they can just go straight to our home screen and they can register for this particular webinar series if they'd like to. In terms of upcoming webinars, what are the other 4 webinars in the series? We're going to talk about the 4 stages of learning. Really understanding the 4 stages of learning is a foundational piece in my mind. Now, remember, I'm coming from an educational perspective. I am not coming from a medical model. I'm coming to you as an educator. And Christy is coming to you as a survivor. So these 4 areas are areas that we have found extremely helpful for individuals. You may not think that they will be. You may be going, well, what do I care about the 4 stages of learning? It is a foundational piece in order to really help you build on your skills as you learn more about executive functioning and some of the other topics that we'll talk about over the course of the year. Pacing yourself to help yourself with neurofatigue. If you experience neurofatigue, this is a very important thing. We have done some webinars in the past with some neurofatigue experts. We're going to share some of what we've gotten from that. And we're going to talk about what we know about neurofatigue and some potential things that could be helpful for that. We're also going to talk about self-regulation and 2 questions to ask yourself to take back control. Self-regulation is a really important piece. As Christy said, she hadn't even heard of it before she was in my class. I talk about self-regulation all the time. It's really important. And the 2 questions to ask yourself are really grounding questions. If you ask yourself the 2 questions that we will introduce, it will help ground you, and it will help you get to the point where you can be prepared and can be really ready for things before you initiate actions. And so we'll talk about that. And then the last webinar in the series is going to be executive function and why it matters after brain injury. Some people may not have even heard the term executive function, but executive function is really just those primary key thinking skills that are so important to our everyday life. And that includes organization and planning and time management. So a lot of those higher order thinking skills that we don't even think about using after a brain injury, they can be disruptive. And it's important to recognize that, look at your strengths and weaknesses in those areas, and then begin to address them. So that is going to be the remaining 4 parts of our webinar series over the next month and a half, couple months. We do have a Facebook group. It's called the Cognitive Skills and Technology Facebook group, Brain Injury, Cognitive Skills and Technology, I think. If you would like to join us there, we are starting a new year, so we're going to be trying to add some more stuff to that and be engaged with that a little bit more. We will probably be putting the webinar videos up in that group so that people can have access to it, etc. So and then the last thing is really just thanking you for your time today. I know, again, it's a Saturday and it's 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. So thank you for taking this time out. We certainly hope that you found this helpful and beneficial to you, and that you will join us for our future webinars as we move forward. I'm going to put in the chat right now a Zoom ID. So after we do the webinars, we usually do what we call an after hours, and it's just an opportunity for people that have participated in the webinar to join and to interact with us and with each other. So it's a Zoom session, so it's going to be a 2-way back and forth. We'll be able to see each other. And it's usually just a half an hour or so, and an opportunity to ask questions, to connect with people, and to sort of, review what we've talked about. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you in a couple weeks for our next webinar in the series. And if you have any friends or family members or professionals that you think might benefit from what we're doing, we would absolutely love for you to share the information with them. So, Christy, any final words on your part?
Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar.
Yeah, great. Any of the professional speech and language pathologists, if you have any questions, please reach out. Survivors as well, please reach out. We're very responsive when people reach out to us. This is what we absolutely love doing. And so you have our email addresses here. If you just want to send us a quick email, we would absolutely love to connect with you. So thank
Questions,
you again.
comments,
Yeah, any questions,
comments,
comments?
any kind of, now the idea just escaped me. Helpful ideas or anything like that type.
Yeah, any tips or strategies that you'd like to share, we absolutely love that as well. So thank you again, everybody. It was a pleasure to have you join us. We hope to see you in the after hours. I'll put that in the chat one final time, and we'll see you in the after hours in just a couple minutes. So if not there, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you again for your time. Have a wonderful day and a couple of weeks. Bye, everybody.